All right, everyone. I'm just going to read a little intro here, and then I'll put it over to Bob Dennison, the chair. First of all, thank you for joining the City of Kingston's Complete Streets Advisory Council. Today is September 20th, 2021. My name is Greg Krupp. I'm the liaison to the Complete Streets Advisory Council, and I organize the virtual meetings. Before we begin our meeting, I'd like to go over a few meeting guidelines to help us navigate this as efficiently as possible. We ask that members of the public and press remain muted and off camera for the length of the meeting. As the organizer, I reserve the right to mute anyone who unmutes themselves. Committee members and city staff will control their own mute button. Good practice would be to mute yourself if you are not speaking to avoid background noise and feedback. If a committee member or staff wishes to speak, they will raise their hands. The chairperson will call on them before they speak by stating their name clearly for all the listeners. All of our meetings are recorded. Both video and written transcriptions are made available to the public on the city's website at a later date. You can submit written comments to the City of Kingston Clerk, Elisa Tinti, at emtinti@kingston-ny.gov, or by dropping them off at the drop box located outside the side door of City Hall. We also encourage the public to reach out to committee chairs. If you have any audio issues, send a text message to the following number, 845-418-9634. That's my number, and I can receive texts, but no calls during the meeting. Again, that number is 845-418-9634. As the organizer for today's meeting, again, I reserve the right to lock and pause the meeting and to eject anyone who is behaving inappropriately. Thank you for your patience. And on behalf of the Complete Streets Advisory Council, I wish you good health. I now turn the floor over to Bob Dennison.
Thank you, Greg. You're getting very good at that. You know, I think that's going to be, and I suspect you may be doing it for some time into the future, depending upon how things go with our pandemic. The first order of business is our call to order. We have a quorum. Andy Turko-Levin will not be with us today, and because she has a work commitment. Emily Flynn may join us late. Kristen Wilson may join us on the phone as she is able while transporting her child around, which is a good thing. We have our first item on the agenda is public comment. I would ask people who choose to make a public comment to limit your comments to 2 minutes so that everybody has a chance to make their comments. We will not be responding, obviously, to comments. We don't, but we'll be listening. I have a number of people that are on the call that and I'd like you to identify yourself when it's your turn to speak. We can start with, we're just going to do this in random order, about Ernesta, who is on the call. Would you like to make a comment?
No, thank you.
Okay. How about Tanya Garment? Would you like to make a comment?
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks. Tanya Garment, 102 Wirt Street. On Saturday, you may already know, there was a third fatal crash that involved a bicycle. And it was with a tanker truck at the very top of Broadway, right where the Broadway streetscape and the roundabout meet. All signs indicate that the bike was heading up Broadway and crossed over from the Anchor side of the street to the opposite side of the street that has the parole offices. I went over and I spoke with a couple of witnesses. They told me that they indicated that that's where how the bike was headed. And at that point, it was a couple hours after the crash, the body of the bicyclist was still under the truck. So I could see that the bicyclist was under the truck between the two sets of wheels, and the truck had just cleared the crosswalk. Both the projects are not quite completed, the signage and the street painting and the signals are not quite finished yet. So the bike lane, because it doesn't have its bike signalization, is closed, which makes it very hard for bicyclists at the terminus of the bike lane to merge onto the multi-use path, which they would normally do right at the end of the bike lane. They'd merge up and they'd be able to make their way over to the crosswalk if they needed to cross. There are no temporary accommodations there for bicyclists as it stands right now. So it's a very dangerous situation for bicyclists right now, ending the bike lane. Also, the crosswalk, which will be part of the multi-use path, is dangerous by many accounts to cross. We are seeing a pretty steady flow of traffic right now. In my opinion, a roundabout is not quite the appropriate solution here, although it is maybe an improvement on the last road configuration. This is a roundabout that is connected to a lot of stop signs, so we will be seeing a lot of backup in the roundabout regularly, especially once the new signal, the signal 1 block down, goes in. Already people are complaining about the Albany Avenue section, and solutions are coming up like, let's get rid of the no turn on red during those hours so we can keep the vehicular traffic moving. It's not a really great situation. So my ask is that you encourage the Common Council to look at this intersection, to take a fresh look. Been many years in the planning of both of these. There so many years that there's been many different people who have been working on it. We're seeing how it works initially. We need some short-term solutions, and we might want to look at the solutions that we have now. For instance, we should have more flashing beacons than are planned for as it is. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for your comment. Darren Seam, am I saying that correctly? Would you like to make a comment? If so, you'd have to, no comment, thank you, okay. Henry Loengard, would you like to make a comment?
Sure, I live on Wall Street, so I go up and down Broadway all the time. The bike is my way to get around town. So right now, of course, the new bike trail is not operational, and so you just ride in the street. And when I hit the roundabout, I just ride in traffic because actually it works really well for a bike if you're in traffic. And the newer sections are kind of cumbersome. And also I noticed that the crosswalks have not been painted yet either. In many places there are like scratches in the ground where they would be there. So there's not much of a signal for drivers to realize that they should not run over people in crosswalks, which they need constant reminders of as a bicyclist. I was actually on that stretch, just south of that stretch on Saturday, so I saw it was blocked off, but didn't know why. But anyway, I'm just thinking, yeah, making that turn onto St. James from Broadway, going uptown or toward uptown, is going to be, you know, a problem from the future bike lanes, which are all stuck on the other side of the street. Anytime you're actually going over to the other side of Broadway. I don't remember if the bike boxes are going to come in, but I can see that they obviously would not work near a roundabout because there's too much other stuff going on, and there, you know, people actually aren't stopping; they're just yielding there. So I don't have any like real solutions to this. I recognize that a lot of this is not in place yet. The safety procedures and stuff, markings and you know, the actual trail and the lights, they're just not there yet. And so to not have extra cautionary signage up while it's in this temporary state may have contributed to this accident. I also want to point out that we know about the fatalities because they're very obvious, but there are lots of non-fatalities that I think are also happening with bicycles that just don't get reported because they're not fatalities. And so to get Kingston to be a safe place to bike is indeed, it's a difficult problem and it takes education, absolutely. And some of that education has to be kind of built into the plans for making these new, you know, all this upgrades and changes in the city infrastructure. So that's sort of my long-winded comment, and I can pass it on to the next person.
Thank you for your comment there. We'll certainly appreciate that. There's someone on the telephone who is unidentified. If you would like to make a comment, identify yourself and make a comment, that would be fine. Your number is 845-636-3657. So whoever that is, speak now or forever hold your peace.
Do they need to press *6 something?
I don't know.
Yeah, they need to press something to get off mute.
Oh.
It may be *69. I'm not remembering.
It's beyond my technical understanding. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I don't know how they would I don't know how they type a message either. So
that's not something that Greg can unmute.
I don't think Greg can you unmute?
No, I can only ask to unmute, but it's *6. It's just *6 to toggle mute, unmute when you're on a phone.
So if our phone-in person wants to do *6 and make a comment, please do so. Okay, no, I don't see it happening. If you want to submit a written comment at a later time, you certainly feel free to do that, or an email comment to, who do they email to, Greg?
Email could be to me.
Okay.
Which is gkrupp@kingston-ny.gov.
So if you'd like to make a comment and are unable to do so verbally, you can email your comment to Greg, and we'll get it from there. Is there anybody else that wants to make Ernesta maybe wants to rethink or having a comment? If not, absent that, I will close the comment section portion of the meeting, and we'll move into our agenda.
No, thank you. I'm all set.
Okay, so on that note, we'll move into our agenda, which I have to find right now. And I would think the first thing on our agenda is going to be the review and approval of the minutes of our last meeting, which were sent out. And I don't know if anybody has any comments. I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of our last meeting. So made by John. Anybody want to second it? Claudette seconds. Discussion. Is there anything we should do to our, anybody has any additions or comments or corrections to the minutes of our last meeting? Nope.
No, they look good to me.
Yeah, me too. Okay, absent any comments or corrections, I'd like to take a vote. All those in favor of accepting the minutes of our last meeting, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Anybody abstained? Anybody opposed? Okay, so on that note, our minutes are accepted. Thank you, Greg. You do a great job with minutes. You really do.
Thanks.
No, I'm struggling for, I guess this is the agenda. Okay, old business. E-scooter and e-bike legislation. We had a conversation last time about a local law recommendation. And if memory serves, we had talked about not recommending a local law that would prohibit e-bikes and e-scooters from private ownership, and that we had looked at the possibility of a pilot for a shared e-bike, e-scooter system, because Bird was looking to do that.
Right.
Is that everybody's? Now, the sample legislation that was circulated a couple of times has a model ordinance there. We could send that over. We could send the model ordinance for shared bike systems to the, I guess we'd send it to the lawyer, to the
Corporation Council.
Corporation Council to do what needs to be done to get it into shape, or to at least have a conversation about whether they want to move it forward. We can make a recommendation to the mayor that, in our opinion, the only thing that the city should do is to do an ordinance about shared systems. Absent an ordinance about shared systems, that will not happen here. So that's my understanding.
Correct.
What's our feeling on that? Do we want to make a recommendation that a shared system be explored or not?
I have a question. Have we gotten any more feedback, Greg?
So we haven't heard anything from, if you're asking about city staff, who it's been sent to. It kind of seems like it's going to need to come from the Complete Streets Advisory Council. Like a push is going to have to come from here. And I guess the big question that maybe you all should advise on is sort of the parking for the system, whether it be docked or dockless parking. Most of the stuff in that ordinance is pretty straightforward.
Yep. That's
kind of the big area where you have to see what's right for the city of Kingston. And then there's a bunch of other things in that ordinance about like the fee structure and whatnot to operate one of those systems, but that would kind of be like an internal question.
In my observation, my personal observation has been that a docked system is the way to go. Dockless is pretty random and problematic, but I don't know what do my other members, what do the other council members think?
I agree with that statement, Bob. I've seen the dockless system deployed, particularly in Ithaca, and it was very hectic and uncontrolled. And I think there would be significant backlash to any system by business owners and residents alike. I think, at least primarily for a pilot program, we should encourage docks in designated locations. And if a dockless system seems to be, if there's some preference for that or some motivation for that, we could explore it at a later point in time.
I agree with that. My concern the last time we discussed this, obviously, which was a few months ago, is that people were going to be leaving all over the place. And I did not think that that would be good in Kingston at all. And that we should have designated locations where they could be dropped off at. I also thought that the possible contractor was promoting having a staff person or somebody go around and pick these up, and I'm not comfortable with that. I really would prefer that we have a designated drop.
John, what do you think? You agree, John?
Yeah, I'm inclined to go with the dock system. There are a few other things in this draft that kind of jumped out at me as maybe not reasonable. One was A5G. Operators shall halt their shared system operations daily at 10, and shared systems shall remain inactive until 5 a.m. the following day. And there's other items in this that are strongly encouraging access for people that don't own vehicles. And that would include a lot of the folks working in hotels, motels, restaurants. And they don't necessarily get out of work by 10. And they may start work before 5 a.m. and to, cut them off from the use of these vehicles that are allegedly there to help them doesn't seem to make sense. You know, there's things like that in this that I think need to be reviewed before we suggest that the Common Council review it for adoption.
Yeah, I agree. That makes a lot of sense. To some extent, also, there's, you know, the pilot should develop some of the specific regulations, the vendor for the pilot, as we go forward, instead of imposing them, because I don't think we know enough about how these things operate. They may know too much, but I think it should be a collaboration.
I did I'll call it a cursory review of what's out there on the web, and as recently as 5 years ago, there were discussions in some of about some of the cities where it took $4,000 to $5,000 per unit to implement these systems, and that they often needed subsidies to do it. And if we're capping these vendors at 150 units tops, I don't know that anybody's even going to be interested in coming in here and dropping a bundle of money on even a pilot, because it doesn't seem like it would be viable for them. You know, then you add in the per unit fees, the license fees, and blah, 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 and it starts to get very expensive. And I don't know if this market could support this as proposed. I think we've got a fundamental question of, do we even want a share system in Kingston? And if we do, is it something that we need to get behind and give better support to? This document to me seems to almost discourage vendors from coming in. And maybe I'm being oversensitive to it, but you know, that was the read I got.
I know Bird has approached the city about a pilot, and I don't know whether it's scooters or bicycles.
Yeah, I think they were dockless, aren't they?
Yeah, which we're not interested in.
Yeah.
So.
Well, the other thing I just want to ask, are we proposing that we promote this as an alternate form of transportation all the time? Is this just for recreational use? Is this just for, you know, daily, I might need to go to the grocery store, drugstore, whatever travel? I mean, I think we're kind of looking at two different ends of this. If we're looking at this as a 24-hour way of transportation, that's to me, I think, kind of different than what I initially heard. So I just want to be clear, what are we actually proposing? I think it's okay to have a shared system. I just want to know, what do we want it to provide, or what problem are we looking to address with it?
Yeah, from my perspective, this would be a mode of transportation to be used particularly for first mile, last mile connections where our transit system doesn't serve.
Okay.
And help to fulfill that gap for individuals, especially, you know, considering the hills, for those who are willing and able to use these types of vehicles. It can provide a viable mode of transportation to get to where you need to go.
Okay. That doesn't necessarily address all of the issues with some of the disabled community, because as a legally blind person who sees someone, I don't think I necessarily want to be doing that, but I get what you're saying. Okay. All right.
We'll get you on the back of one, Claudette.
Yeah, well, that requires the right partner. We'll have to be careful about that.
Okay.
I was up in on one of the rail trails. I think it's called Albany Heidelberg or something like that, last weekend, and they've got a hub in Albany that had CDTA bus, it had the bike share program, it had park and ride, it had trailhead parking and trailhead access, and that to me was, you know, kind of an ideal situation where, you know, everything came together and then could disperse from there. But, you know, it was a real transportation hub. And if there was some opportunity for that in Kingston, I know there was a transportation hub discussed previously that seemed to have died. I don't know whatever happened with that proposal, but you know, I could see these share programs fitting in with that nicely if we were to pursue, you know, some kind of a transportation hub.
So what I propose then is to write a note to the mayor saying that we think that it might be appropriate to have a shared system in the city of Kingston on a pilot basis. And if he is of a mind to, if he agrees, then we can develop a draft piece of legislation for the Common Council to pass to enable that to happen. Is everybody good with that? I don't want to develop the legislation unless Tilly blesses it. I mean, why spend the energy?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
Yeah.
I think that's reasonable too. As long as we definitely know what direction they're looking for. Because right now, I don't think we know what it is that they truly want.
Right. I think we ought to tell them that we're looking at it as a first mile, last mile transportation tool, not a tourist, not solely a tourist accommodation.
That sounds fair.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll do that. Okay. Next item, the traffic safety campaign. Kristen Wilson.
Hold on. Could I interject for a moment?
Absolutely.
Robert, because I only think that the shared bicycle component of the law only addresses one element of the law. The other side was raised by John at our last meeting, or one of our last meetings, and that is with regard to the legality of e-bikes and e-scooters within the city of Kingston, both on our public streets and more specifically on our public paths and bicycle lanes. And it's my understanding.
The state law covers the street use, but the trails and parks, we would need a local ordinance authorizing their use there.
Correct. That's my interpretation as well. I reread the brief from Cornell today in preparation, and it would appear that as the New York State legislation is written, e-bikes and e-scooters are not allowed on paths within our city. And therefore the city would need to pass a law, considering whatever the position of the city is, to either allow them on the paths and bike lanes, or if they don't do anything, then they're not allowed there. The city also has the ability to consider speed limits if they are used on the paths, and whether helmets should be allowed on these types of vehicles if they're allowed to operate.
What's our opinion? I mean, do we want to endorse allowing e-bikes and e-scooters? My sense is, I'm betting there may be people who are doing it already.
There are.
You know, do we want to endorse that? Do we want to point out to him that legislation is required to make that legal?
Well, I think the Empire State Trail is a big part of this discussion, because you've got people that are traversing that and they can't run into a brick wall at Kingston. What do they do?
Right.
Right.
Push their e-bike through town, you know?
Yeah, go around. Yeah, it's not feasible. Yeah. If we want to promote mobility and alternate modes of transportation, particularly people getting out of their cars to get to where they want to go, I think we should allow them on our paths and bike lanes, particularly because in many cases it may be the safest alternative to using them. Yep. But I think we need to consider all the users as well, and it may be required to have a speed limit, especially if these scooters and e-bikes are able to reach speeds of 20, 30 miles per hour or more.
Yeah, they can go 30
That's
anyway.
not appropriate for those paths.
It's not. And I also think that we have to, if we just propose the legislation that they be allowed in Kingston, I do think the Corporation Council may have a different opinion on that, because that could change different liability issues. I think you're probably right that if this is part of the Empire Trail, that if you're on an e-bike or some kind of shared bike system and you get to Kingston and you can't use it, that is a problem. So we just need to be clear about, if we are going to allow them to be on our paths and bikeways in Kingston, do you need a helmet? I think you do. Should there be a speed limit? I think there should be. because in some of these cases, it's going to be people walking or whatever in shared spaces. And I love bikes, but I can tell you, as a person who walks most of the time, bikes can sometimes go faster than the average walker, person with a stroller, and they don't always pay attention. So I'm for it as long as we put in certain caveats as to what is really going to be required to make them friendly to everyone while they're using this vehicle.
Greg, yes.
I will say that the New York State Vehicle and Traffic Law does have laws regarding helmets, I believe, and also class 3 e-bikes and e-scooters, which is anything that goes over 20 miles per hour, is prohibited outside of New York City. So in New York City, you can have an e-scooter. And so some of the people I see in the city of Kingston that have these scooters that go 30 miles an hour, those are actually technically not street legal outside of New York City.
Yeah, there's a fair number of those bicycles around also.
Right.
Throttle only. They don't have to pedal. And they're technically not legal, but they're here.
Yep.
So if we were thinking about up to 20 is fine, then legislating that would be redundant if we were to say, pass that as an ordinance.
So here's what I propose. I'll draft a note to the mayor with our recommendation that it's really 2 parts. One, that we need legislation in the city to permit the use of e-bikes and e-scooters on our trail system.
Mm-hmm.
And the second, with limitations like speed limit and helmets and etc. And then the second part is to recommend a shared bike system, a docked shared e-bike system pilot, and see where that goes. Is that kind of? And I'll send it around to you all before I send it to the mayor.
Okay, that sounds right. I think.
The other piece of that is I'm not sure what the scooter systems are, if they're all dockless or if they have docked ones. But we do have people using e-scooters around town already, privately purchased ones. And if we need to include those for the ordinance regarding the operation of the shared systems, I think we need to understand if they can be docked or if they're all dockless. And I can't answer that offhand.
So Bird, like when we had questions for Bird, and they can include geofencing and specific parking areas for their shared system. Okay. So they can do a dock system. As far as you can't really extend that dock system to private ownership. So that in the vehicle and traffic law that was passed, there are all these restrictions on where you can park an e-bike and an e-scooter. You can't park them right in the middle of the sidewalk. But I don't think you could enforce docking of privately owned vehicles. That would be a difficult ordinance.
I was in the context of the shared system.
Right, but in the shared system, you can.
Okay. And yeah, geofence, because there's some parts of the city we probably don't want them. So geofencing makes some sense, for the shared system.
Right.
And then the other piece of it is the parks.
Mm-hmm.
I would see parks as destinations. Mm-hmm. And if we have a shared system, or even without a shared system, if we've got users of e-bikes and e-scooters, do we put it in this ordinance allowing the use of e-bikes on the trails? Do we also include the parks? I didn't say that very elegantly, but I think you get what I mean.
Yeah. Well, okay. I'll draft something up and send it around, and we'll see if the mayor blesses it. Then we'll probably fall to us to play around with an ordinance. But let's see what he says first. No point in spending time if he's going to say no, or if he has one. Traffic safety campaign. I see Kristen is here in 2 places. Welcome, Kristen. Is this your last meeting? You can still be a member,
Yeah. I can actually become a voting member, I think.
There's an opening or two.
Or two.
Yeah, I'm in two places because I'm sort of in between transporting my daughter from one place to another. So I'm also on the phone when I have to get back in the car, so I can listen in. But I'm at home right now, so I can listen or I can speak. Yeah, I think this will be my last meeting for a while. I have to reevaluate how I can participate once I'm at RUPCO. Yeah, I may be just coming to listen, or I mean, I'm not going to disappear from transportation in Kingston. It's something that I'm very interested and passionate about. So I will stay tuned.
Well, congratulations. I think it's great for you, bad for us. But
if I ask Kristen, what are you going to do?
I'm going to be the Assistant Vice President of Community Development at RUPCO.
Wonderful.
So, I mean, initially I met Guy Kemp, who, well, I don't have his position. I have a sort of a something that's like his position, but I met him on the Complete Streets Advisory Council. So,
so there's history here.
So there's hope for us.
Yeah. So, I mean, community development encompasses a lot of different things. It's about making communities healthier. And certainly transportation is an aspect of that. So I'm not sure exactly how I'll participate, but I will be staying tuned, and I'll be around.
Good.
Great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So I'm going to I had your name here for the traffic safety campaign. There's really not much to say about it, except for that the city council did not vote to fund it.
They did not vote to fund it. My understanding is that the mayor did send a letter to council to request again that they consider funding it.
Okay.
There's an article in the Freeman right now to that effect.
Good.
It came out within the past couple hours.
Good, because we'd like that to happen. All right, well, let's hold our breath and let's talk to our older people and encourage them to do the right thing and fund it.
I can make an additional point. Since that occurred, the UCTC has had a small amount of funding on its UPWP for a general public outreach support of roughly $5,000. And we have been discussing doing some sort of campaign to support public outreach efforts with regard to traffic safety, particularly utilizing the UCAB buses, doing a bus wrap.
Mm-hmm.
We can do this at a relatively low cost. The problem is developing a dynamic and useful and effective public safety campaign. It's not as simple as saying, drive safe. That's not going to work. It's not going to have the impact that we want it to have. Right. So we will continue that discussion. That's the best I can say right now. We may be able to deploy some sort of basic messaging on our buses in the near term, but I think in the long term, we need to have a continued discussion about having a robust and continuous traffic safety education effort throughout Ulster County, not just Kingston.
Right.
And that's all I can say right now.
That's good. That's good. People are starting. That's good. That we definitely need that, as we said.
And I just wanted to mention that the city has been posting about updates about what's happening on Broadway. In the meantime, the city staff are making an effort to share about the construction updates and what's going on Broadway, as best as we can with the capacity that we have. But it's not the traffic safety campaign that we had, it had a full-fledged campain that we had envisioned earlier. So we'll see what happens.
It's a noble effort, and they should keep it up. But you're right. We need our original proposal, our original idea is really yet to be fulfilled, and it's necessary. Now, Emily showed up just in time. How's that for timing? Pedestrian bicycle master plan. Where are we at?
A few members of the Complete Streets Advisory Council got invitations today to join our project advisory committee. So to back up there, that means that we went into contract with our consultants, Barton and LaJudas, and we are just about to kick off the pedestrian bicycle master plan and also develop the public outreach plan. If you all go, if anyone who's listening wants to go to engagekingston.com, we have the pedestrian bicycle master plan up there, and there is a preliminary survey that people can start to fill out. My understanding is that this is just the start of it, that we'll have a more intense survey at some point, but this is just a kind of a start to collect information for the bike ped master plan. So we're hitting the exciting part. I think the next month or so will be some of the kickoff activities, and then it'll be many more months of the needs assessment, and then the kind of the preliminary draft is not until many months out still, but we're getting to the exciting part.
Good. I think B&L will do a fine job too. It was a good choice. I think they'll do you proud. So that's good. Any questions on that? Anybody have any questions? Sidewalk Improvement District. Oh, yes, John.
Before we move on, back to the education piece for a moment. I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to engage school systems. I remember when I was a kid in Kingston schools, we had bicycle safety training and pedestrian training and so forth. And based on what my kids experienced, that doesn't exist anymore. Right. I don't know if Emily or Christian have any experience, with their kids in school now, if they get advised if those programs exist in the schools today. But if they don't, I think that's a good place to start, because the kids need instruction, and I don't think they're getting it from the parents. Right. The parents need instruction too, and if we can get them young and train them.
Yeah,
I think that's a good place to start.
I agree. I think it's a good element of a traffic safety campaign. Is getting to the schools and
the kids will nag the parents.
Right.
I mean, if you get the kids to get it, they'll bug the parents. You should have stopped. You should have watched out for that bicyclist. That kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah. Put on your seatbelt. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good piece of it. Yeah. Sidewalk Improvement District. I'm guessing there's been no activity. Right. Okay.
No, this is something too, with Kristen leaving soon, we kind of have to figure out how we're going to move forward with this, because she was kind of the one who was in talks with the mayor on it and pushing it. So we should kind of have like a debriefing, I think, before she leaves.
Just as a point of clarification, it's my understanding if the city is going to move forward with this proposal, it would need to go to a public referendum.
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
So now we get into the whole timing and political and elections and all that mess around implementation. So
it would seem, if that were the case, that we've missed the boat for 2021.
I think you're right.
So we could get a referendum at this point,
right,
unless it were already in motion.
It certainly would be an interesting topic to discuss with people who are potential candidates for for city common council. So if you have that opportunity, it might be interesting to mention to them, how do they feel about sidewalks?
I think that we were, I'm trying to remember the last time we spoke about it, but I think we were actually shooting for 2022. But the first step was to sit down with the mayor and corporation council to map out a schedule that would include, all of the things that have to happen along the way. I think there's various public hearings and right, an education campaign that would need to happen to educate the public about the issue. So I guess maybe like right now is the time. I have very limited time between now and next Friday when I'm done. But so right now is the time to say, that perhaps if the mayor or the Complete Streets Advisory Council wants to advance it, I can certainly share all the files, or maybe even Greg knows where all the files are, yep, of the past work that we've done. And then perhaps somebody from the Advisory Council would like to set up a meeting with the mayor and Corporation Council to help steward it forward if it's still of interest.
You know, what I would think at this point, given that there's also going to be a new Corporation Council, so is this Corporation Council, how much interest is he going to have in this adventure? But Emily, with her exciting pedestrian bicycle master plan, I see is the wedge to get that started. I think the first piece of that, the ADA, you know, the Americans with Disability Act compliance, is the crack in the door to say you got to do something. And here, well,
that's interesting that you're saying that, because that's what I'm thinking, Bob, that the newly about to be formed sidewalks and pedestrian walking and pedestrian, I'm not sure what the name is right yet, but you can't have good walking if you don't have good sidewalks. So they do kind of go hand in hand, and that could be a way to help move that along.
Yeah, so the district could be an outcome of this, of the pedestrian bicycle master plan, in that, you know, we have this need, we've identified the need. Brian's work, you know, has been a huge step forward. B&L's work will be another step, and then we get to the point where, okay, now you got to do something, which so the time, you know.
I mean, I feel personally that a referendum can offer the public a really clear choice here. On one hand, fund it through a fee, or if that's not your preference, then be prepared for enforcement from the city. I mean, the city has not been enforcing it for, I don't know why, legacy reasons. It is burdensome to maintain sidewalks from a cost perspective as a property owner, but people are demanding better sidewalks. It's a very common theme we see in just public dialogue. So you got two choices: enforce the law that's on the book, or we can try something different. And a referendum is a pretty clear choice on how to move forward.
In previous places I've worked, there's been serious payout for trip and fall accidents. One of the things I know from one of the cities I worked in, because I spent a lot of time in court over it, was that we ended up having to create our sidewalk repair plan in order to alleviate what the city was paying out in liability, which was getting to be pretty steep. And I'm curious if whether or not the Corporation Council or whoever does risk management for the city of Kingston has those numbers, because personally, I think that that is something that the taxpaying community needs to know, because certain trip and falls, certain hazardous can be extremely debilitating to a city's budget. You know, it's a good reason to say, all right, let's get these sidewalks fixed and maintained.
If memory serves, we did have that number for a number of years, and it was big, but it wasn't scary big yet.
Well, you're getting new people who are moving into Kingston who might possibly be more litigious than some of the other people who live in Kingston. And like I can tell you from cities where they were litigious, you want to get this under control as quickly as possible. You really do.
Yeah, you also run the risk of those places that have not been in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, and someone has sued them on that regard, and they've had a chunk of their budget every year, a court ordered, set aside for sidewalks.
Yes,
which, you know, I mean, that's where it ends up. You know?
Yeah, that's right.
So, these are all good conversations for us. Yeah. When
you're under a consent decree, in order to get that done, you want to think long and hard about possibly getting it done quicker.
Yeah, you want to be ahead of it, you know. So it's good. So
say that I wouldn't you know, wait until January or the new Corporation Council is in to discuss it. I would go forward with our existing Corporation Council, because I think really the work that needs to be done with that office is walking backwards from the referendum. What is the timeline? And my recollection is that it was about a year. So that means that if you're incorporating it with, if you're incorporating some of the education about it with the head bike master plan, or you know, planning that education out with the consultants, then really should have a clear sense of what the timeline is, and that is based on the laws and the legislation around.
So what you're saying is, if the goal is to possibly be on the November ballot or whenever the next referendum would be for that, we need to start thinking about it now, because you can't, the longer you wait, the further you put off getting it done.
Yeah, I would, I think that the last time we spoke about it, we talked about doing it in November 2022, having the referendum then. So we've definitely missed this November, no doubt. But I think that you got to talk with Corporation Counsel now about November 2022, because there are many milestones you have to meet along the way. So I would get that laid out, and I don't know who's going to take the lead on it now at the city, but I would, you know, potentially Bob would want to send a note to the mayor and say that the advisory council is interested. And
well, you know, here's what I'll do. I'll draft another note to the mayor. This will be separate, saying that now that the pedestrian bicycle master plan is starting, we need to seriously think about how are we going to implement the outcome of that plan. And there's our earlier conversations about ways to pay for sidewalk improvements, you know, need to be picked up again. And we should have a conversation about, I don't know if I want to write down district yet, but I'll draft some language about sitting down to talk about how we pay for, you know, when as soon as you start talking about implementing a district and it's written down, there might be some people who are uncomfortable with that concept. So I'd rather just open the door and the conversation with the mayor and the corporation council about how do we move forward, you know. And you know, we believe the district is the best way to go, but others may not see it that way, I guess. Okay, I'll do that too. God, I'm getting stuff to do here. I don't know about this. This is
keeping you from going to New Hampshire.
Right.
We're gonna put you guys to work.
All right, Hurley Avenue, parking in the bike lane, no parking signs. Where are we at?
This is an item from John. So I figured he would speak on it, but I can't remember where we left off. It was just an email. We
want them, I guess, or wanted them.
Yeah, I think we need to do something, either, you know, paint it on with the, I think the kind of the universal symbol is a P with a circle and a slash through it, or signs on poles. It's a ongoing problem on Hurley Avenue, Thomas Street for sure. And I don't think people are fully aware that we have a local ordinance that you're not supposed to park in the bike lanes. And without signage of some sort, most of the driving public around here probably isn't aware of this. You know, something needs to be done. And, you know, that could possibly be part of that education program too. You know, bring up things like
That's a good point. That's a good point. You know, pavement marking is going to be done for the year. It probably already is done for the year for the city. So it might be, but I think part of the education would be another big piece of this. And then the police have to enforce it. You
know, another bike lane enforcement related issue is on Hurley Avenue, they're using that bike lane, particularly up near Washington Avenue, as another driving lane. And I've actually had people, while I was in the bike lane, I've had people pass me on the right in the parking lane.
Really?
I mean, it's just ridiculous. And I don't know if changing the lane arrangement is viable there to put the bike lane back towards the curb. or,
yeah.
you know, I'm not sure what the answer is, but it's dangerous for cyclists because people are not honoring the painted bike lanes there.
Yeah. But, you know, it's the point, you know, it seems to me it goes back, much of this goes back to the education piece, you know, and it's that, and I don't like this 4 E's that they talk about. Sorry, Brian. I like the old 3 E's where you're talking about education, engineering, education, enforcement, this whole emergency stuff on the end, and the other one's out of order the wrong way.
And 5 E's.
5, now it's 5. They're out of order, you know. I think the education piece, which needs to come first, we should do. And I think that would lead us into things like, you know, better enforcement, peer pressure. You know, people are gonna, you know, people don't drink and drive because of peer pressure, not because of really anything else. And so we have to create that kind of a feeling about pedestrian and bicycles and traffic control devices that people don't seem to pay attention to, especially around those that are not vehicle centric. But it goes back to education, I think. Okay, project updates. I don't know if you know, as Kristen runs away, we can probably go quickly through these.
Yeah, I can give them.
And Greg knows everything now.
Kristen seems a little busy.
I saw you out there on Broadway with your helmet and, you know, looking official, intimidating that contractor.
That's it. So the streetscape, they're almost at substantial completion. They have done some of the striping. By the end of this week, they'll complete all of the striping except the specific green epoxy striping that has to happen for the bike boxes and the conflict zones. And then aside from that, it's mostly punch list stuff. All the concrete should be done. So pavers will be finishing, and we'll just have a punch list walkthrough. So they're almost there.
How was that contractor?
For the Broadway streetscape?
Yeah.
I think,
easy or was he a pain?
Well, this is a public forum, so I'm not going to get too into it. I think, you know, it was a big project. But I think the finished product is we're happy with it.
Looks good. Okay, good.
That's the most important part.
Can I ask a question though regarding the status of this traffic signals? There are several signals on the road, motor vehicle traffic signals that are not operational at this point in time, and I understand that the cyclist signals are on back order or something to that extent.
So
do we have a schedule?
All of our projects are being affected by serious supply chain delays. They're even having it on the roundabout. They're missing a couple RRFBs, 4 RRFBs. And right now, the bike lane is closed because we don't have those signals. And we're having a meeting this week with Stilsing, who does the electric for multiple projects in the city, just to get a timeline for what our lead times are and exactly what the issues are. Because I'll kind of jump ahead here, then Broadway Grand intersection is going to have similar delays with the fluted poles and the signals for that. PSAP, all the 6 intersections we did throughout the city, those are complete except for RRFBs and other signal things. So all of those things are delayed. And that's where most of our projects stand at this point, is like, we're almost there on just about everything else except for signal equipment. So until that time on Broadway that we have those bike signals put in, we cannot open that bike lane.
And most of those are manufacturing issues that the contractor just can't get the supplies?
Out of contractor's control.
Got it. Okay.
It's a national issue.
Okay.
So
Greg, are there more light poles going on the north side of Broadway? And there seems to be a big gap where there's no poles at all.
All the poles should be at this point. What area in specific are you referring to?
Oh, up in the, I got to think about this location wise. It would be up towards Downs, Elmendorf, up that way. There seemed to be a lack of poles for streetlights.
they should all be in. Let me check the plan and see if everything has been solved at this point, but that portion should be complete. So I'll have to look at that.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I-587, the roundabout is substantially complete. All their pavement markings are in. Like I said, they're just missing 4 RRFBs on the I-587 side. The 2 RRFBs at East St. James are installed. And then they just have a bunch of punch list things to do. Broadway Grand is basically half complete. They did the Prince Street realignment, and then they shift traffic over to what they did on Prince Street, and now they're working on the Grand Street side. So that the actual alignment should be complete pretty soon, with pavement by the end of the year, and then they'll just be waiting on signal equipment. Same thing for pedestrian safety action plan, and then the only other item I have on here is just Henry Safe Routes to School, which will be bid by the end of the winter for construction in the spring. And we're also picking back up on the Franklin Complete Streets project to get that bid this winter for construction in early spring, starting in spring. Did you have anything to add, Kristen, as far as project updates?
Not as far as construction is concerned. You're the expert now, Greg. But we also are advancing the design for the DRI Uptown Transportations project, which includes Rank Drive and intersections at on Clinton and Albany, Clinton and I want to say John and Westbrook Lane. And also, well, there's 3 intersections. I'm blanking on the 3rd one right now, but so that is underway, and I believe we may, well, the city may advertise that for bid this winter as well for construction next year.
So they figured out Clinton and Albany, huh?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a full complete streets rehab of Clinton Avenue, which I know John may have been hoping for.
Local, yes.
It's not a full streetscape rehab. It's really just addressing the intersections, the issues at the intersections. There isn't enough funding in the project for a complete redesign of Clinton Avenue and Albany Avenue.
Good. Yeah. Thank you.
One thing I have a question about that I'm wondering, I think one of the reasons we wanted to do that project is we were thinking that once the roundabout is in, there would be severe backups at Clinton Ave and Albany Ave. And I don't drive uptown that often. I'm just wondering, for those of you who do, have you observed backups up there, or?
I did see it backed up from Clinton Avenue through the roundabout one day. And I actually stayed on Albany Avenue, so I didn't tie up the roundabout until it cleared ahead of me.
Okay. All right, so there are backups.
I have not witnessed, I don't drive through there very often during that time of day. The only backups I have observed in the roundabout have occurred during construction because of closure of a lane due to construction vehicles moving. I will note that the modeling, and Bob, you should appreciate this, when the consultant did show us his model for the intersection at Clinton Ave, the system and operations were really wonderful. There was, I don't remember what the level of service was, but things were really opened up.
Good.
And started to move much smoother through the area from a traffic, motorized traffic perspective.
Yeah, crossing that as a pedestrian is very tricky.
Yes.
And
you
I've
have
heard
to be willing to step into the street before anybody will stop.
That's what I've heard from a number of pedestrians about the circle as well.
Yeah.
Around that it is still not comfortable for walking people. They still difficult.
Much better before, where you had the traffic had to stop at the lights, and now you've got to literally step into the road, and hope that they pay attention, that they're supposed to stop for pedestrians in the crosswalk.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't advise stepping into the road at all unless you have eye contact with the motorist and you know they're going to stop.
Yeah, that's the game.
Otherwise,
you
you're
gotta
taking
play
very
out there.
significant risks that you might not recover from.
Yeah.
And you can't guarantee eye contact either. You know, just
No.
because they saw you doesn't mean that they recognize you.
If you stand on the curb, cars will just buzz right by you.
Oh, I agree. And I'll make a couple points that at least with Broadway with a single lane setup, it's much easier for motorists to now feel compelled to stop for a pedestrian. But my only other point is this is an enforcement issue. It needs to be enforced by KPD to let motorists know that they have to follow vehicle traffic law and yield to pedestrians. There's no other way to do it. You can have the banners at the yield signs so people are know what your intentions are. I've seen those in New Paltz and in plenty of other places.
I believe the law reads, though, that they have to stop for pedestrians in the crosswalk. If somebody's standing at the curb waiting to enter the crosswalk, they don't have to stop, and they don't.
Right.
So you can wait a long time to get a spot where you feel safe enough to step off that curb.
And that's the issue, is when does the pedestrian feel safe enough that they should start to initiate a crossing. And that is something that we may have to work on, because if you don't feel safe enough, you'll be on that curb for a long time.
Long time.
That's good. And that goes to, I agree with Brian, that goes on education and enforcement. I did a study in Muncie where we did a lot of that. In fact, the Muncie police had a bunch of overtime, and they would go out in plain clothes and step into crosswalks. And if you didn't stop, you walked away, you drove away with a ticket.
Yeah.
They didn't mind doing it because it was overtime. I mean, it worked out well. But over time, people realize that if you see somebody stepping in a crosswalk in Muncie, you better stop, because it might be a cop with a ticket book.
I just wanted to mention that, and I know there's some members of the public on here, that with the RFBs that Greg was talking about earlier, that are part of the I-587. What does that stand for again? RFB?
Rectangular Greg? Rapid Flashing Beacon, which in broad daylight
is bright.
Do you know if those are pedestrian activated?
Yeah, push button.
Yeah.
So there are some
on Hurley Avenue.
Yeah, they're triangular. They're a diamond sign, or with flashing all around it. And when they come in, they will be at the roundabout, at the crossings where they should be. But
they're not there now.
Understand they're not.
They can't get the chips. So, okay, good. So that. And as the stuff gets farther along, hopefully people will adjust. But I think education is a key piece of it. New business. Transportation grants. Kristen doesn't care anymore about them.
I think we're slowing down on transportation grants right at the moment. However, there was a raised grant submitted about 2 months ago for a very large, it was over $20 million request for waterfront transportation, connecting waterfront pedestrian and bicycle transportation in the waterfront. And we also submitted a number of grants through the CFA process for, I believe it was Kingston Point Rail Trail Phase 2. And I'm sort of blanking at the moment, but we do have a couple of grants that are already in the hopper. And we did take a break on the TAP grant that's due at the end of September. I know Brian is applying for a TAP grant for a different.
I understand the planning department might be applying for the Transportation Alternatives Program.
Yeah, but not in Kingston.
Correct.
This is a different location, right? So that's really the update on grants.
Okay. Okay. Before I get into new business, Daniel had his hand up. And Daniel, if you have a comment, you can make a comment, but identify yourself first. Or maybe not. Maybe you didn't.
think there was a comment submitted in the chat.
Okay. Do bikes crossing spaces need to push if you're walking your bike and you're crossing in a crosswalk, yes, you have to push the button.
You don't have to, it's your choice.
Right, that's true. But if you're in traffic riding, you know, if you're taking your lane, then obviously you don't push the button, you just ride with the traffic.
And Greg, can you clarify how many RRFBs will be deployed on the roundabout?
So there's one right now at East St. James Street, and then there's going to be, well, two, you know, so two buses,
right,
one crosswalk, and then there's going to be two at I-587, two crosswalks, 4 beacons, because it's split there, right? So on either side of the I-587. That's what the plans call for, and that's what will be installed. They're just waiting on 4 more beacons for the I-587 side.
Okay, good. Maintenance EST Broadway Route 32, Empire State Trail. Oh, maintenance on Broadway Route 32. That's an interesting question.
I was wondering what that stood for.
Yeah.
Yeah, I put that in. Reason I put it in was because there's brush encroachment on the sides, and the sidewalk and the shoulders have a lot of debris on them. And you know, both from a pedestrian cyclist standpoint, these present hazards. And I was wondering if that was a NISDOT responsibility, or is that a city responsibility for that corridor?
At this point, that is a city responsibility. So those complaints can be put in through 311 or to me, and I'll forward them to DPW, and it'll get on their list that way.
With the rains, there was a fair amount of loose gravel and sand washed onto the shoulder, particularly on the northbound side. And on a bike, you can pick up, you know, pretty good speed there.
Yep.
And with that loose rock and sand on there, it was definitely a hazardous situation. And, you know, I'm aware of it because I ride it fairly regular, but anybody on the Empire State Trail who's coming through once, you know, they're not attuned to those, you know, hazards. And there's a fair amount of touring cyclists that come through. I do a lot of maintenance on the Walkdale Valley, you know, down tree removal. And you know, I've had as many as 11 in a group come through at a time that are, you know, touring through the area. And, you know, sometimes I recruit them to help me, you know, move stuff off the trail that I cut. Running the chainsaw and moving it gets to be a bit much at times. And, if I can get trail users to help me move the stuff, I do it.
It's like a toll. It's all right.
Yeah, yeah. I always congratulate the volunteers for showing up at the appropriate moment. You know?
Right. All right. So Thomas Street striping plan. That's gonna. I guess the Empire State Trail, when it's done, will have that, or is that the city's problem?
It's already been striped. I think John had concerns with there's like a contraflow bike lane there. So it's one way if you're going from Broadway towards Frank Guido's.
Yeah.
But Empire State Trail has striped it so bikes come out there to Broadway.
Yeah. And on the Frank Guido side of it, the bike lane truncates right into the back of parked cars.
Right.
Which seems terribly unreasonable.
Right. Why it's even a bike lane, I can't figure out. I mean, because you end up back in the system there and cross over by the parking lot, you know.
Yeah, I just think that's the way the Empire State Trail is routed. It's just
they go around Fashion Lane.
Yeah, and then
over to Railroad Avenue. And I'm not sure why there's parking spaces there.
Right.
Period. I mean, there's a big parking lot right across the street.
Well, people do park there. I've seen them. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, there's nights where they've been parked on both sides of the road in the bike lane, completely filling it up. So there's definitely a problem there. That's why I asked about the signage, number one. But number two is, what can we do to not truncate the bike lane in the back of a parked car?
Right.
I mean, it doesn't seem reasonable.
Right. That's yeah. I would take the position that they should be on roadway, but for that connection by Railroad Avenue. What's that little stub for? But
well, they come off of Broadway,
right,
to get up on to Railroad Avenue, Greenkill.
Yeah.
And that was, the road that they picked. The alternative would have been Cornell, which is, to me, a worse place to do it.
Yeah. No, that's probably, they did the right choice.
Yeah, I think Thomas was the right place, but the execution needs some tweaking.
Yeah.
The one thing I was going to say is we are moving forward with, it's a Midtown parking lots design. And Cornell is one of the parking lots that's going to be there. And that whole area is going to get restriped. So we are taking feedback for that project. And it's on Engage Kingston. So I think the finished product will be different than what it is now.
Okay.
Is there another plan that shows how that connects to Broadway? Because the one I saw truncates at Sacramento Lane. And the way it looks, cyclists are going to have to ride across Thomas Street to get onto the path that'll take them over to the Empire State Trail. And it didn't seem reasonable. And I was wondering if there was additional design that shows the interface with Broadway.
Let me check and get back to you on that. I'll send something over.
Okay, thanks, Greg. They're also doing the county is improving continuing the pathway, the Midtown. I don't know what you want to call that one.
It's called the Midtown Linear Park.
Okay, yeah. Which I see work going on there, and it's good to see it. Good to see work going on there. I think it's going to be very interesting, which will connect to that parking lot, right? I assume, because you're not going to go through the ambulance.
Yeah, it's actually going to come right over to the end of Thomas Street.
Yeah.
And connect there. And I think that's how that path works. That comes off of Sacramento, the existing Sacramento Lane. I think that path takes you over to the Empire State Trail. Also, it's right next to the ambulance corridor is where the trail comes in.
Yeah, that'll be neat. That'll be good.
Yeah, no, that'll be great progress.
Okay, the last item on here is new members. We do have someone who submitted some interest, and we looked at. I invited her to attend this meeting. She chose not to, but we're still looking for people who have some interest, and we'll consider them for membership in the Complete Streets. And we have vacancies, so if you know anybody who would be an inspired selection, encourage them to submit an application, and we'll go from there.
So now we have 5 members currently, and ideally we would have 7, correct?
Yes, I think that's correct. The right 7. We want to be the right 7.
And you get term limits that are going to hit some of us.
Right.
So.
Well, I discussed that at one time with the mayor, and I don't know what the deal is, but from what he explained to me at the time was that unless once your term is up, you should reapply and go through the process, but you serve until asked to leave if you don't go through the process. So go through the process if you're terming out, but don't feel that it's a free ride and you can walk away because your term is up. That doesn't All right, announcement, communications, events. Anybody have any exciting events or communications? I haven't had much. I did get one communication from a council member about speed in the city, and I'm going to talk to him a little more about that. Apparently there's a concern of people not adhering to our 30-mile-per-hour speed limit within the city limits. And I know the common council is interested in that, and how can we encourage people to follow the law and conform to a reasonable travel speed. So more to come on that. Again, to me, it goes back to education, but that's the only thing that I've heard, and I'll let you know as that develops. Anybody else have any communications or announcements that they want to share with the gang?
Yeah, so Franklin Street, Emily put this in the chat, but for the Franklin Street Complete Streets program or project, there's an open house on October 6th, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. at the Everett Hodge Center.
Okay.
So we'll be presenting the design alternative for that project and taking feedback from the public. So it's a public information meeting.
So, and much of what I've observed as the controversy about that project is the sidewalk material. There are those who are concerned about accessibility, and those who are concerned about aesthetics. And the question about the two meeting will be a challenge for the designers, I think.
Yes.
But you don't want to say anything about the Cornell Street. It's not Cornell Street. The sidewalk from the Colonial Gardens to Cornell project. I don't know if there's anybody.
Flat Fox.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, actually, we haven't. There's no new news that I have. I think Greg mentioned that they are finalizing comments and will be coming up with a summary shortly, but we haven't met, so I have nothing to report on that right now. Greg,
yes.
If you add?
We just did another round of public outreach for safe and accessible Flatbush and Foxhall Avenues. We sent out mailers. We did some pop-ups where we got input from people, and now we're sort of compiling all that and trying to whittle our way down to just one preferred alternative for our consultant to design. So we're going to be moving forward with that. But we did apply for more money, more funding for this project through some of the member funded items. So Antonio Representative Delgado's office. And so we're still waiting for that to get through the pipeline to see if we're going to get the money and how that's going to affect our project, because it would seriously expand the limits of it and the scope of it. But for now, we just did public outreach and we're moving forward from that point.
Good. Thank you. Okay, I don't have anything else. I think we might be done.
Could I add one point
Sure.
for future consideration? Today, I was reviewing bike and pet laws like I sometimes do, because there's always more to learn and refresh my memory on. And there's something I came across that I think we should consider at a future meeting. Section 1234A of vehicle traffic law indicates that a bicyclist must use a bike lane if one is provided. So I would like us to A, consider whether we believe this law would apply to our new bike lane in Kingston, and then B, what the city's plan for enforcement might be.
Yeah, that's interesting, because when we had a public meeting regarding Schwenk Drive, I raised some concerns, and at that meeting, I was informed that that was not a bike lane, that path that they were talking about putting next to it, so that you didn't have to use it under state law.
A multi-use lane.
Yeah.
So is that the way around it?
Well, for a cyclist, if they wanted to use the lanes and the traffic signals, based on that meeting discussion, they could do that,
yeah,
and not run afoul of the law that requires you to use the available bike lane, because it's not a bike lane. So we've got that situation on Greenkill Avenue. We've got it on the proposal for Schwenk Drive, and I'm not sure, if the cycle track on Broadway falls into that bucket.
So we need to have clarification.
Right.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah, because on Broadway, you have sidewalks on Broadway.
Right. So you're not going to have a conflict, theoretically.
Yeah. Because it's always the transitions that are an issue for me. As you move from one type of infrastructure to another, can you do that safely and smoothly on the bicycle? And a lot of times I find I'm better off on the road using you know, the vehicular traffic controls as the safest way to move through.
Right.
But that's me, you know, and I understand perfectly well that I'm not the, you know, the average cyclist, because I've ridden, you know, up from Florida a couple times. You know, I've got a different, you know, take on the world of cycling than the average person, but
not the weekend cruiser. Yeah.
No, I'm. You know,
Tanya points out that the Mark Crook said about the roundabout that cyclists can stay in the traffic, and I stay in traffic when I go through the roundabout.
I generally do too, but I did run into trouble transitioning from Broadway to make a left. I would call it a left turn to go over by Clinton Avenue. Because I was in the proper lane, at the edge of the proper lane to make that route around the roundabout, and somebody came up on my left and then cut in front of me and went straight across the Chandler Drive.
Oh,
yeah.
And it's like, you know,
yeah.
You know,
and you shouldn't
have given me, you know, 3 seconds to complete my move. They felt compelled to pass on the ramp.
And you shouldn't kick their door when they do that to you.
Or break their mirror off.
Right. Okay. That's all I have. I don't know if anybody has anything else. We'll entertain a motion to adjourn if there's no other business.
I move to adjourn.
Brian seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Done. Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thank everybody.
I'll circulate those memos.
Take care.